Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and we are finally here after quite a long break in between the quarterfinals and the semifinals. We finally get to jump in to a top 4 matchup here in the world. At Worlds 2022, we finally get our first of 2 semifinal series as we see JD Gaming taking on T1. Incredibly interesting matchup that I did detail very in-depth in my semifinals preview video that went up yesterday. Of course, if you haven't seen that video and you want to know my thoughts on what I expect to happen in this series, you can go ahead and check that one out up in the iCard right now. Definitely recommend you do so before watching this one, as it gives a lot of the context for my thoughts going into this series. But of course, very, very interesting. The final vestiges of the LPL left here with JD Gaming and the unkillable Demon King Faker and his 4 young guns taking on each other to see who's going to be making the World Finals. If you guys were excited for this, I know you were. I know you guys were excited for this. How could you not be, is why I know. Let me know down in the comment section below, who did you guys think was going to win? Did the series go to your expectations or not? Of course, let me know down in the comment section below. But let's go ahead and jump into our analysis. If you are new here, what we do is we go game by game, analyzing what went right, what went wrong for both teams, and where I think they can move on in future games in the series. So that means we get to kick it off here with game number 1. And game number 1 was a JD Gaming victory here. JDG takes game number 1. I actually went against the grain and picked JDG in this series. I think something like 90% or so of Crystal Ball picks had T1. I went with JDG, and from the get-go, even, I wasn't confident in the prediction, even in the prediction video. I did say I felt good about JDG, and I said I felt better about them than T1 technically, but my spread, of course, was 3-2 JDG, 3-2 T1. This was going to 5 games for me. These were 2 really evenly matched teams, and that showed up in game number 1. Neither team really taking a gigantic lead. This was a back-and-forth affair that JDG is able to pull out by, quite frankly, just being the best team-fighting team in the world. And we've known them to be that all year long. That's what they were in the LPL. It's the reason that they were able to win the LPL finals. We have to remember, not only in actual finals, but in winners finals as well to even get there. They went up against Top Esports. In winners finals, they went down 0-2 to Top Esports, ended up clawing their way back in all 3 games, and they didn't have a gold lead early in those games. This is a team that knows how to play from deficits because they're so good at playing 20 minutes and after in a game. And so you can never really count them out, and that definitely held up here in game number 1, as JDG did a phenomenal job of knowing exactly where they had to play. Obviously, some mistakes here or there from both sides, but JDG would often have one member of the team just completely running it down at some points. Most of the time, it was Hope in the bot lane on Aphelios, but sometimes it was JDG on Jax. They would just get picked off, and the fight would start, and they wouldn't really have a lot of ways to engage. But you're sitting now at a 4v5, sometimes even a 3v5, and JDG would start winning those fights. Absolutely ludicrous game state from them. JDG was able to turn around a ton of objective fights in this game, most notably the Final Dragon, as well as Elder, and kind of turn it into their favor. They did give up Baron once this game, but overall, I would say JDG's control of the map was a lot better, if only because they were able to give up so much and yet still maintain presence pretty much everywhere they went. Most of that, of course, due to the fact that they just can't lose a team fight because they are too good as players. Let's talk about the drafts just a tad bit. Not really the draft guy, but I'll talk about him a tad bit here. For JDG, I do like what they go for. I really, really like the Jax as the R5 counter pick. Really surprised to see Zeus blind picking Camille with 369's Jax up. Jax destroys Camille in lane, and you could argue that that's his best champion, so very surprised to see that. Kanavi gets his Viego. Yagao gets his Talia. That's awesome. Hope and Missing on a bot lane that does scale and doesn't need a ton of resources early, so you can invest a ton into that top side, which they really did want to do. I think this is exactly what you want from JD Gaming. It gives you options moving further into the game while also playing to the strengths of your comp with the Shove and Roam mid, and a jungler that can do a ton of damage towards the back half of the game, especially if he's ahead. On the side of T1, I actually really hate this draft, and I tweeted about this. Shameful plug. Go ahead and follow my Twitter. I tweet on game days, spoiler stuff that you're going to hear in these videos, but you can get it early and you can get it on time if you follow the Twitter. Don't like this draft at all. Camille Galio lanes are obviously a really, really solid wombo combo kind of duo, I would say. Adding Vi onto that, you have a ton of engage options in many, many different scenarios. The problem is that Galio sucks. There's really no other way to put it. Galio is just not a good champion right now, and I understand that what Galio offers you is really good. Taunts are great. Global knockup, really, really, really solid. And the ability to give your ally a shield in a team fight, always going to be great. The problem is his numbers are just really bad. So even if he is super useful in terms of his kit, the numbers don't really add up, and that's both offensively and defensively. He is a wet paper blanket in the mid lane if you build any sort of damage-oriented build like Faker did this game. I think you could tell in these team fights he was getting blown up incredibly quickly, and it didn't really offer the team what it needed to offer. He didn't have a ton of time to get those taunts off, and even when he did, he was often only taunting 1 or 2 people for a couple of seconds, and then it was over. And Galio, really without damage or defensive survivability, isn't going to be all that useful. Camille, on the other hand, I could see a world in which this could become useful because you do have some quote-unquote immobile kind of carries on the other side, mostly Aphelios, but the problem with that is you drafted Camille, Vi, Lucian into Taliyah, which is just not a good idea generally, and Yagao had a field day this game. I'll talk about him in a bit, but Zeus really was never able to get into these fights because the Taliyah ground was just really, really tough to get through, and not only that, but you wanted to get that wombo combo off of Camille kind of jumping onto the backline, ideally a Taliyah or an Aphelios or something like that, to lock them down and have the Galio with that big knockup. Unfortunately, for that to work, Camille needs to survive the initial engage with the Galio shield, and she really wasn't doing that all that frequently, even when the wombo would go off. And so I really don't like this duo, like, moving forward. I don't think that these two champions are all that synergistically playable right now. I think Camille generally can be a good pick if you find an avenue to play like an aggressive top laner, but I think in this case it really just wasn't the angle. I do like Lucian Nami early in the draft, and going for Vi does make sense because it does give you disruption, even if I don't love the champion right now. I think the rest of that makes sense. I just think the Camille Galio really kind of throws off this idea. They had to go for a more pick-oriented comp, but there was literally no shot, and I tweeted about this. There was absolutely no shot that this comp was ever going to win a straight 5v5 team fight, even from ahead in the game, and I think that definitely played out. So, for JD Gaming, what did they do right? Well, I think the early game action was a little bit back and forth. Definitely some good plays going over to both sides. A lot of action in the top side. 369 was really set up to succeed on this Jax, and he did a lot of good work in this game. He was very difficult to actually deal with, and he played super aggressively to the point where he really felt like he was taking over most of the map, and that definitely benefited all of JD Gaming, especially towards the back half. But player of the game, pretty easy choice in this one, is going to go to Yagao on the Taliyah. I've been hyping up Yagao all year long. Even going into this series, I don't think a lot of people were talking about Yagao as one of the standout members, but one of the big reasons why I ended up picking JDG as my favorite in this series is I honestly think Yagao this year has just been better than Faker at the supportive mid lane role, which they both have been playing. I think Faker definitely has more of an opportunity to carry games than someone like Yagao does, at least on their own, but Faker really hasn't been given that designation. He doesn't really play a lot of carries anymore. He's been stuck on a lot of these more supportive-oriented champs like the Galio or like the Lissandra. Those have been some of his highest priority, and if you're going to play support versus supportive mid laner in the mid lane, Yagao is just simply better at that than Faker is, and Yagao really showed that off in this game on the Taliyah. I don't expect him to be able to get this pick over the course of the rest of the series because he obliterated T1 on it, and it really just caused them so much disruption. They had absolutely no shot of going in. You've got a ton of dashes on the side of T1, 4 of them to be precise. Everyone except for Nami has a dash here, and there's really not a lot that Nami could do to kind of stop Taliyah. And so when these extended fights would go on, when T1 would get a pick on a JDG member or two, all of a sudden this zone control that JDG offers with the Taliyah, and generally speaking with whoever they have left, whether that is the Viego or the Jax, typically you're going to have at least one frontliner that's going to cause a little bit of panic on the other side. It's really difficult, even in an advantageous state when you're like a man up, to be able to engage on that. Yagao played it really, really well. He's easily my choice for player of the game, but big shout out to Kanavi. He had a good early game, and I thought he played the back half okay. And then 369, I thought played this game for the most part really, really well. He made some errors here and there, just not a perfect game, but for the most part, he was really, really solid. And this Jax definitely showed why it should be at least a little bit feared. You can't just blind pick Camille into JD Gaming. On the side of T1, I've talked about how I thought Zeus and Faker were both essentially irrelevant this game, which was a huge problem. You could argue that this team's best player, Zeus, it was irrelevant, and then Faker being irrelevant, never going to be a good kind of idea to take those two off of some agency, although I don't think it was intended. It certainly ended up being that way, and so the game was really on Guma and Keria, And credit to them, I actually think they played really well this game. The Lucian Nami has been a really good pick for both of these players over the course of this tournament. Keria especially was hitting some phenomenal bubbles in game number 1. He was really devastating in lane in particular, was making Hope and Missing's life a living hell, and it was very difficult to trade with them. I understand that Lucian Nami, generally speaking, should be able to power out Aphelios Lulu, but I think Keria playing this well made it even more difficult. So Guma and Keria, I thought were actually really, really solid in this game, and that's a good solid note, I think, to build off of for T1 in the upcoming games, but you really got to rework that top side. The Camille Galio did not work. Owner never really had a chance this game. He was often pushed off of objectives really fast, because you have to remember, yes, Vi is like a bruiser, but she's not tanky. She will die pretty quickly if you full engage onto her, and she really wasn't all that much of a help in the back half of these team fights, because really she could go on one target and then she would get blown up, and that's really it. That's kind of what Vi has come down to at this tournament. In pretty much all the games she's been in. So Zeus is going to get my dud of the game, and Yagao's going to get my player of the game here for game number 1. But that's just game number 1. Of course, it's an important one, but series is not over by any means at all, as we still have a bunch of games to go, and with how close this one was, I'm incredibly excited to get the rest. So who's going to be moving out of game 2 with the victory? Is JDG going to be able to take a commanding 2-0 lead in the series, or is T1 going to be able to even things up and create a best of 3 environment between these two teams? Well, the winner of game number 2 was T1. They are able to take game number 2 and tie the series up at 1 apiece. Very interesting matchup here, because draft definitely went very differently. At the beginning, I thought it was all going to go the same. T1 stays on the blue side. They continue to pick the Lucian Nami lane early. They go for Nami on B1 again here, and JDG answers with something similar. This time, it's Aphelios and Sylas in the early rotation, because Sylas does make it through draft instead of the Viego from last game. They decided that was a more worthwhile ban, and I completely agree. I think taking Viego out of the hands of Kanavi is a really big win. It's his best champion, in my opinion, and for you to be able to get him off of that is always going to be good, but it does leave the Sylas up, which is a really strong pick, but it seems T1 has a pretty good answer, as on B3, they actually go for the Ryze here, which is an incredibly interesting pick. We actually saw Chovy do really, really well on that Ryze pick in the quarterfinals. We've seen other players actually be super proactive on it. It can create opportunities that other mid laners just can't do. Typically, it's not going to be your damage carry, but in a comp like this, you certainly don't need it to be, and I actually do think it filled its role incredibly well. But outside of that, you go for more aggression. You go Owner on the Poppy. You go for Zeus on the Yone, his classic Yone. I would consider this his best pick, even though the Camille is pretty high up there. Jace as well, another pick that I would consider super high up on the side of Zeus. I think Yone has to be the one that has really stood out to me when he plays it, that he just looks so much more confident on it. JDG goes for the counter pick here on R5. They go for the Malphite, which I think in theory can really work here. You're looking at Yone, Lucian as your two main damage dealers. On the side of T1, Malphite really does shut down both of them pretty heavily, so long as there isn't any shenanigans. Now, one thing I was really thinking about here was, and I don't know how comfortable either of these players would be doing this, but if Zeus could take the Ryze and Faker could take the Yone, or if perhaps they just want to swap top and mid. If you have the Ryze into Malphite, that lane is over. If you have the Yone into Sylas, that lane is over. And so that could have been a little bit of an issue for JD Gaming. Fortunately for them, they don't opt into that. You do get your Malphite into Yone, you do get your Sylas into Ryze, which I do think is what they were looking for, but they actually compound it on 2 late game carries of their own in the jungle and bot lane with Bel'Veth and Aphelios. So those are going to be the 2 avenues they're looking to carry from. T1 more so top side, JDG definitely more so bot side in terms of where they want to put focus on in this comp, which is, I think, in favor of T1 if I had to take a guess, considering Zeus is better than Hope. But that kind of played out. I'm not going to hold out suspense or anything like that. That is exactly how it played out, where Zeus actually was incredibly strong up in that top side on the Yone, really had trouble stopping him. In the early game, it was relatively slow. Again, he's going into Malphite. It's not really going to dominate, but even so, Yone should still have an advantage into that lane. You draft Malphite for the late game, not for the early game. And then you hit the late game, and no one's stopping Yone. He's Eing in, he's ulting onto 4 people every single time because Zeus simply just does not miss. He's dominating this game from the top side on this Yone, an incredibly solid and spectacular performance, I would say. I was very close to giving him player of the game here. In fact, he's like 1/2 player of the game, I would say, but it was really hard for me not to give player of the game here to Guma Yushi, who I thought was genuinely phenomenal on the Lucian. This is how you play Lucian at the highest possible level. Now, we've all been talking about Guma. We talked about him in summer, where it just felt like he was off a bit. He didn't have that same kind of aggression that he had in spring, and he was dying to random ganks and really was out of position and wasn't always getting the most damage out of his team fights, even though I still think he was very good in team fights. For the most part, it was really a lane where he took a step back. But he gets to Worlds here. You could argue that he was better than Viper in Group A, in Group Stage, and then you could definitely say that he was better than Gala in their series against RNG. 280 carries that I think a lot of people went into this tournament saying are way, way better than Gumayushi. Not saying he's better than either of them on a neutral level, but what I'm saying is I think he's been playing better than almost any AD carry in the world at this tournament so far, and that definitely continued in this game. He's not someone who is going to shy away from action, especially on this Lucian pick. He's going to dash Gale Force into you with that culling and hope that he can just obliterate you before you have a shot. Now, there were some misplays in this game, obviously. Played a little bit too close to the sun there with Yagao's Everfrost, was able to get stunned up and killed in the mid lane trade, but outside of that, it was basically perfect from him. He was so aggressive, always on the edge of doing damage, and with Lucian, you kind of have to be because he's not really this giant long-range threat in the back half of the game. He is short-ranged, even if he is going to be doing a lot of damage, and so you do have to kind of have that killer instinct on him, and Guma definitely had that. I mean, this was one of the more impressive Lucian games I've seen in a really long time. Guma is playing at the absolute highest level right now, and if he can keep this up, T1 is very, very scary as a team. Because not only are you looking at one of the best top laners in the world, if not the best, you're looking at one of the best AD carries in the world with what Guma's playing like. But I don't want to take away from the rest of the team by just hyping those two up. Everybody on this team played really well this game. Keria has been phenomenal on this Nami. It's clearly a pick he's incredibly comfortable on because he has been styling on Hope and Missing all laning phase in both of these games. He continues to be an absolute marksman with these bubbles. This is an ability that you don't often see consistently hit at the pro level just because players are good at dodging it, but Keria has sixth sense in order to guess where people are going, and he can execute on that well. And then you've got Faker on the rise. I mean, I kind of saved all the macro discussion for this, but this might have been the best macro game of the year by any team here as T1 completely execute everything on the map in incredible efficiency. I'm talking sneaking Baron. I'm talking giving up one person to get inhibitors. I'm talking basically walking into the Nexus without anybody knowing. Like, their ability to dominate this map and control the flow of the game was pretty much unparalleled to any team I've seen play. And considering you're going against JDG, who I would definitely not consider to have bad macro by any means, that was incredibly impressive. I mean, obviously highlighted by the teleports top lane and then the Rise ultimate into Baron pit, so they had absolutely no idea that they were taking Baron. They were able to get that get out even with a gold deficit at the time. That was incredibly impressive. And a lot of that I do attribute to Faker. I'm not going to say he's the one making the calls, but the Rise is really what allows them to do that, and this Rise was influential in this game. You might not see it from the scoreline, but this was one of the most influential zero-kill games you will see in a very long time. He was active on the map. He was making sure those side lanes were always pushing in T1's favor, which really created a lot of problems for JD Gaming because they were always at a map disadvantage when they would take these neutral objective fights. But even outside of that, his damage in the back half of this game was super impressive, and just generally speaking, everything that Rise ultimate creates is also on him, and so you gotta give him a ton of credit. Overall, T1 just played this game absolutely masterfully. This is a World Championship level performance that they just put out here in Game 2. For JDG, not a bad game. I really don't want to come across like they played poorly. This was actually a pretty decent effort from JD Gaming, and I think going against most teams in the world, they win this game pretty handily, but T1 is just simply not most teams in the world. JDG definitely had some opportunities to be able to take the lead here. They really want to rely on this Bel'Veth to be able to carry towards the back half of the game. Multiple opportunities that if Bel'Veth was able to get maybe an extra kill or two in the early game, maybe things could have gone just a tad bit differently for the game overall, but unfortunately for JDG, they're not able to make that happen. Hope was super fed in this game. I do not want to take that away. Hope actually did a really good job in the early game to be able to generate leads. Missing did a great job being able to enable that as well, and obviously the Lulu ultimate does keep that Aphelios safe a considerable amount towards the back half of this game, but you're Aphelios, and at the end of the day, you're looking into a Yone, you're looking into a Lucian, even a Rise. Your lack of mobility is certainly something that can be exploited on this team, and it was. There was really not a lot of room for him to be able to outplay some things later in the game, and when he was kind of your threat to win, that's a little bit of a problem. 369 on the top side is getting at my dud of the game on the Malphite. This Malphite pick just did not work out. I clearly see the idea. You want to try and shut down the Yone and the Lucian with this Malphite. Generally, Rise is a super low damage mid laner, so you're not really worried about that being your only source of AP damage on the other side. You figure you can really shut down the enemy team by picking him. Unfortunately, the Malphite just didn't have any sort of survivability towards the back half of the game. This was a champion that while he could survive a long time, he really wasn't doing anything else. Outside of the ultimate, he doesn't have any form of hard CC. He does have the slow on his Q, but he's not offering anything there. He's not offering any damage really at all, even with the ultimate, because if you don't build damage on Malphite, he's really not going to hurt all that much, especially in the current meta. And so he ended up being someone that was either picked off, being out of position because he had to play aggressive, or he would go in with his ultimate, try to do everything he could, do 0 damage, and the enemy team would just kill him really, really quick. Even if it was slowly, it wouldn't matter. You wouldn't have a ton of time to follow up. The Malphite just didn't offer enough to justify it here. There's a reason we haven't been seeing this champ really at all at Worlds. I was shocked to see the Malphite come in over the Maokai. I think that is an incredibly shocking turn of events. How the tables have turned with the priority on Maokai falling so hard that now even Malphite's getting picked above him, but definitely not a good game for 369, and unfortunately the counterpick just doesn't quite work out. But overall, not a bad game for JD Gaming, just a few things you need to clean up. T1 had a much better draft this time around. It very much felt like in game 1, T1 just didn't do their research. They basically gave JDG everything that they wanted in this game. No Viego, no Vi, none of the super popular LPL junglers that they've been getting super consistently, I would say, throughout the year. Them, RNG, all these teams that play those two champions above all else. It's really good to see teams kind of take notice of that, take it off. You can give Aphelios over and not be super worried because he doesn't have the same kind of agency. And as long as you trust your solo laners to be able to win out, it's a good play in the end. And so T1 just has to continue this momentum. For JDG, you just need to be able to have a slightly better early game. Yeah, you got a little bit out macroed, but ideally now you know some of the crazy plays that T1 can make. I would take away some of the macro threats that T1 offers. I'm not sure if that means banning the Rise, or if it means just picking something that he just has no business playing into, which Rise has a lot of picks like that. It'll be interesting to see the direction that they go, but for T1, it's really, really important that they tied up the series here, because we're moving into game number 3. In game number 3, it's a blank slate. It's 1-1. Whoever wins this is going to gain full control of the series from here on out, because no matter who wins, they're going to be on series point for games 4 and game 5. And so, who is going to be able to take that? Is it JDG or T1? Well, the winner of game number 3 was T1. They are able to take game number 3 off of the back of their game 2 win, and this one was even better. While this was still a relatively close game, especially early on, because of some really good plays made by some really good players on the side of JD Gaming, T1 just has the code cracked on how to beat this JDG team towards the back half of the game, and it really is simple. I'm surprised more teams haven't figured it out over the course of the year. How do you beat the best team fighting team in the world? You don't team fight. You pick them apart. You do the 1-3-1 that everybody is not doing right now. And it worked. It worked really, really freaking well in this game. You go back to the Rise really early on for T1. That's going to be a huge pick for you, not only in this game, but obviously last game through this whole series. Rise, Faker's most iconic champion. Really not surprised to see him be able to pull it out, even when it's weak, and look incredibly dominant on it. Guma and Keria continue their super high prio on this Lucian Nami bot lane for T1. JDG continues to answer with the Aphelios Lulu. Definitely interesting to see this happen 3 games in a row, but I think we can firmly say now that Guma Keria definitely win this matchup, and they win it hard. They win it a lot, while Hope, I think, played well towards the back half of the game in game number 2. Game number 3 was an absolute stomp, and it makes this bot gap grow wider and wider by the moment. Now, there were flaws for T1. I want to talk about those first before we jump into all of the good things that T1 was able to do, and that's going to be the top side of the map, which is not what I expected to say going into this series. Zeus and Owner, they were really good in game number 2. Zeus certainly had a down game 1. I would say Owner did as well, and they honestly weren't all that great in this game either. I think Owner made some really good plays, the solo laners, to even have a chance to be able to play this game out, because the early game was just simply not good for this top side. There is no way that you can spin it that way. 369 versus Zeus. 369 dominated the matchup here in game number 3. He picks the Renekton here on B4 blind. Very bold to pick blind Renekton. This is something that we know T1 has answers to. They pull out the Gangplank here. I really like Gangplank into Renekton generally just because of the scaling, but early game that can be a little bit of an issue, and you know what? It absolutely was this game. Shout out to all the people on Reddit that will continue to tell you that Renekton is a worthless pick that has literally 0 value. They can continue to do their thing. I'm meanwhile going to sit here and say Renekton is still very good at the thing that he is very good at, which is dominating early. And I think when people disrespect that damage and that trade ability early on in the game, when you try to take 2v2s on that top side, when you're Nocturne Gangplank and you're going into Renekton Viego, it's just simply not going to work out super well for you. 369 was super fed in this game, and he was honestly the best chance that JDG had at winning this towards the back half. Obviously, the fact that Kanavi also was able to get a lot of gold up on that top side helped a lot, but 369 being able to generate that in a top lane lead was really surprising and really good. So that was kind of the bad from T1. And Zeus, quite frankly, didn't get all that much better throughout the game. He had one fantastic barrel combo in a fight in the top lane. Outside of that, really didn't do all that much towards the back half of his game. Zeus was definitely a little bit of a weak link here, but it's fine to be the weak link on a team of 4 really, really solid players. Where Owner made some mistakes early, he was able to recuperate, regenerate, and move around the map and generate a lot of gold for Faker, most specifically on this Rise, who again had a fantastic game. He had a fantastic 1v1 on 369 in the top lane that he somehow was able to live. It's actually ludicrous that he's able to not only win, but survive that 1v1. He is just simply too good on this champion at this point. Even when the champion's not good, he's simply too good. That's a Fed Renekton that he just beat as a low damage champion in Rise. Incredibly impressive. Not only that, but the Realm Warps continue to be absolutely massive for this team. It allows a myriad of different macro plays that they can make throughout the map, and you give T1 an inch, they're gonna take a mile. That's just the kind of team that they are. They're one of the best macro teams in the world. They showed that throughout the year. One of the biggest problems that this team had was that they played way above their drafts, so even games where they had terrible drafts, they would often win in the LCK purely because they just couldn't play to lose. They are too smart of a team. They don't give up objectives for free, and they know exactly where the enemy team is gonna be at all times. It really does help nowadays that Guma, Yushi, and Keria are playing like the best bot lane in the world, which, make no doubts about it, they are playing like the best bot lane in the world right now, and it is fantastic to see for T1 fans. Guma's gonna get my player of the game again here in game number 3. I think you could realistically give this one to Keria on the Nami as well. I feel really bad not giving Keria a player of the game on any of his Nami games, but like, it's just so hard. Guma played so well in games 2 and game 3, but Keria honestly has been a little bit of the star of the series for me. He has just been exceptional on a champion that, while it's been incredibly important for being able to enable one of the most premier high damage AD carries in the game right now in Lucian, it really isn't something that we've seen make flash plays on its own. Even a champion like Nami that does have ability in their kit to be able to make plays with the Q, with the ultimate, you can really set your team up for a really good spot with those if you play it super right. We've mostly seen her delegated, at least on a major stage, to being a little bit of a support assist for a champion like Lucian, but not when Keria plays it. Keria plays it like the superstar that he is. I got a ton of flack in my World's Top 20 list for putting Keria above not only Missing, but putting him above Lehens as well in my top 20 players at Worlds. This is the Keria I thought we were going to get, and this is the Keria that we are getting. This is the best support in the world. Him and Ming can certainly duke it out in my opinion, but Keria dominated that series against RNG as well. So if this bot lane's really going to play like this, it's unstoppable. Guma plays with literally zero fear. It's terrifying to watch if you're a T1 fan, and it's also terrifying to watch if you're a JDG fan, because he's doing so much damage, but he's also right on the edge of being caught out every single time, and he's going to make some mistakes, but for the most part, he is doing a ridiculous amount with what he is given. He's playing Lucian absolutely masterfully, and this, in my opinion, is the kind of mentality, the kind of aggression that you need to be the best AD carry in the world. This is what Ruler has. This is what Viper has. This is what Jackie Love has. Guma, I think, over the course of this tournament, is certainly cementing himself into that conversation for me. He really has played that well. It's the aggression, it's the no fear, it's the knowingness that if I go in and I blow 3 people up, even if I die, we can win the fight off of that. I'm not scared to win the fight for my team. I love that from him, and I think he executes on it perfectly. T1 has just been phenomenal over the course of the last 2 games. Even game number 1 was incredibly close. They just were barely not able to edge out JDG. But for JDG on their side, you got to give credit to the top side. 369 and Kanavi, like I said, played really well. Were able to generate a lot of leads in the early game. And 369, for his credit, never really let foot off the gas. He was going in. He was getting solo bolos on Zeus. He was getting them on, I believe, Owner as well throughout the game. Even, I know he killed Keria a couple times as well. Like, he was killing people. He was certainly not useless towards the back half of this game, and this Viego could do damage. The problem, unfortunately, was everybody else. Everybody else was a little bit off kilter. Yagao was just not a part of the game. You take Yagao off of a champion that can really be super proactive. You put him on something a little bit more meta, like Azir, where he has more of an emphasis to carry the game. The damage portion of his kit is significantly more important than anything else he can offer. He was 0-0-0 by like 15 or 20 minutes into the game. Just wasn't really getting involved. I just think that completely takes Yagao off of his best skill set. Even if Azir is a super power pick right now, I really don't like JDG going to it. There's no surprise that I think it's been left up by both teams over the course of the series so far, even though Azir is super popular. It's because neither of these teams particularly like to play around a damage-dealing mid laner. And then the bot lane. Really, there's nothing else to say at this point. They are getting hard gapped. I want to mince words, but I can't. Hope and Missing are just simply not on the level of Gumayusi and Keria. This is the weakness for JDG. It's been the weakness for JDG all year long, while Hope and Missing have done a very admirable job playing weak side and being able to consistently maintain at least an even form and not have to be super carries. Now that they're playing some of the best bot lanes in the world, like Gumayusi and Keria in a best of 5, they're really showing the weakness. Hope is just not a player that should be in the semifinals of Worlds. And I hate to say that because I really do like Hope, and I like the trajectory that he has as a career arc, but he's just not a player at this level, right? Like, and I mean that in the nicest way. He's gonna get my dud of the game here, but he doesn't have the aggression, and when he does have it, he has it at the wrong times. He can often get caught out just farming in the mid lane later in the game for no reason, and then during fights, he's significantly more passive than he has any right to be, even when the other AD carry is running in and obliterating your front line. Really just a bad game. That's not even mentioning the fact that he gets run over in lane. Just not a good series overall, I would say, for Hope, and Missing really hasn't been much better. This has been a gigantic support gap as well. This is just a bot lane gap. Both bot and support are firmly on the side of T1, so that's really what you're going to be looking at moving forward into game number 4. JDG's bot lane simply has to be better. Hope had a very good end of the game in game number 2, but he's going to have to actually stand up to Guma and Keria in lane. Missing needs to play something with a little bit more proactivity, and maybe Hope needs to get on something that's a little bit safer. I don't know if that means something like an Ezreal, but whatever ends up coming out, it needs to be able to be a little bit more self-sufficient. Aphelios just isn't the pick to be able to survive a lane where you're not as good, and so as much as I like the pick, I think you need to move away from it. For T1, just keep rolling. You got it. You know what you got to do. Zeus is typing top diff in all chat, and you know you can win now. If you can win without your best player on your team playing well at all, getting completely gapped in their lane, you can win. You can win the series in game 4. So just stick to the plan. Get Guma on something he can play super aggressive on. Let Keria be able to support that. And let Faker and Owner continue to dominate the macro and the map play of this series. So moving into game number 4, it's going to be very interesting. Is T1 going to be able to close this out after losing game number 1? Are they going to punch a ticket to the World's Finals and end the LPL's chances of having any team in there? Or is JDG going to keep the series alive and push us to a game number 5? Well, the winner of game number 4 was T1. They are able to win game number 4 and solidify their spot in the 2022 World Finals. You've got to feel excited for this roster. You've got to feel excited for these players because, man, they had some adversity thrown their way this year. Let's not beat around the bush. There were a lot of people counting this team out, and to see them in World Finals has got to feel so good. I know the 8,000 bandwagon fans that pretend, oh yeah, T1 was good all along. I really believed they had spring form going into the tournament. They all exist now for some reason, but go look at the comment sections of all my videos in pre-Worlds. You're going to see a lot of people who don't believe in T1. Hell, go check out my LCK videos. You're going to see a lot of people saying, not surprised at all that T1 got destroyed in finals by Gen G. They're just not the same. They draft awful, blah, 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 blah. This team's in World Finals. All the criticisms, it's gone. They've figured it out. They got to the point, and you know what? I'm so happy for them. Let's talk about this game first and foremost before we talk about the grand implications. This was a stomp, where games 1 through 3 I think were relatively interesting. Game 1, super fun. Game 2, also incredibly close. Game 3, a little bit less so. T1 definitely had an advantage in that one, even if 369 was super strong. Game 4 was a shellacking. This was T1. It was incredibly one-sided. There were like 5 aces in this game on the side of T1. I think I tweeted out like /FF please at like 14 minutes into the game. Like, it was over. This was not close. This was a demolishing, and T1 earned it. Their comp, first of all, looks a lot better Really like what they were able to do. I don't love the blind Varus into this matchup here. The R1 Varus is incredibly bold, picking a super immobile AD carry that it has okay damage, like good backline damage. I wouldn't say great backline damage, but good damage coming from the backline. Like, that's okay. Would have preferred something a little bit better there. Obviously, no Lucian. It was banned out, but you've got a ton on the plate. Really, really surprised to see the Varus kind of be the move there. I think that's something that whoever ends up facing them in the finals could take note of, that Varus might be their, like, tier 2 pick here after Lucian. I'm not saying that for fact, I'm just saying that might be something to take note of, but they end up, JDG that is, answering with Jhin. And, wow, that was a pick. Now, I'm certainly not going to sit here and rag on a team for drafting Jhin, because I like Jhin as a champion, but God, Jhin is bad, and he's bad right now, and he's really bad for this comp. Like, this was a miserable pick, and it showed. I'll throw one instance out there, but I think you could give a lot. And obviously, you know, the rest of the team wasn't perfect. I can blame Karma for the loss of lane quite a bit, and I will. Trust me, I'll get to that, but there was that fight around Rift Herald that everybody on T1 was like, I don't know, 100 health or less by the end of the fight, and you've got Hope there, full health, just kind of trying to fire on the backline, and he does literally nothing. He does absolutely zero. If they had any AD carry there, if they have literally any of them, if they have Aphelios, if they have Varus, if they have Ashe, like literally anything, right? I know Ashe was banned, right? But like anything, literally anything. Ezreal, for Christ's sake. You drafted the Karma. If you have Ezreal in that spot, you get a quadra kill there. Like, it is super duper free, but Jhin does so little, like so little, that it ends up being a complete loss because he has to reload and he just gets chased out of the fight anyways. Like, it's just so pointless to have him in this game. He does so little damage. The utility does nothing because you're running Silas, Sejuani, Karma. So you've got utility. You don't need utility. I just don't get it. The pick doesn't make literally any sense to me. And I think it was, I'm not going to say it was a game-losing decision because everybody played bad this game, but I don't know. That fight could have been turned around and that game could have been very different if JDG was walking out of that with a really strong AD carry, even if it was something like the Ezreal, which I think we all expected to come out after they took Karma on B3. Especially after T1 didn't ban it. They were more scared of the Ashe. And so to see the Jhin come out, really didn't like that at all. But everything else on the side of T1 was good. I like Gragas in the top lane as an answer to Sejuani. He can really buffer early game and is really useful in the late game if you can play him well. The Viego takeaway on R2 from Kanavi, always a good sign. Faker actually on a champion that can deal damage. I'm not saying that he certainly can't do it. I know I've talked about this a lot over the course of the year, that Faker really isn't the damage dealer of T1. It's not because he can't do it, it's just because that's not the style that T1 likes to play. They don't like to play through him, but they put him on the Azir carry here, and boy, does he have a beautiful game. I mean, Jesus, some of those engages were perfect. It puts Yagao's Azir game in game number 3 a little bit to shame, and that's really the difference between the two. While Yagao, I think, is a more consistent support player if you've got everything right going around you, I think Faker is a much better player with resources in his hand, and I think we saw that in this one. And then Guma and Keria just continued to show the world, like, hey, bot gap, just a crumb of bot gap in this series. Yeah, I mean, it was a demolition. Guma was fantastic again on this Varus. He didn't have to do nearly as much on the Varus, luckily for him, as he did on the Lucian, where in those Lucian games, he was right on the edge of, you know, aggro every single time, was getting Everfrosted and dying in some of these fights because he was pushing too far forward. In this one, he just got to chill behind Gragas and Renata and just free fire on the backline, and he got a billion damage done, because that's Varus if he has a great front line, which he had this game. And then we get to the player of the game here in Keria on the Renata, his best pick of the year by far. I talked about that in the quarterfinals as well. He gets it here in game number 4, and this is just a masterclass. Keria genuinely put on a masterclass in this series. He was the best player of the series. He's my player of the series. I don't give those out super consistently, but if I'm giving one out in this one, it's absolutely going to be Keria. He was just so ridiculously phenomenal. He gapped Missing so hard, and I think Missing's a good player, so to see him gap him so hard in lane in particular is disgusting. Missing had literally zero shot. This Karma game was a disaster from JD Gaming. He was caught out early from a flash handshake, even though they were doing damage early in the lane. He got caught once and he died, and then it was just repeat. It was over and over and over. This Karma had zero effect. Missing continued to be out of place. He got destroyed. Every single laning phase was pushed out. Only played Lulu and Karma. This was not a good end to the season for this JDG bot lane, where Hope was doing zero damage on the Jhin. Karma was doing zero anything on the Karma, so, or Missing, I guess, was doing zero anything on the Karma, so not a good showing from the bot lane, but it's not like anybody else was all that much better. 369 lost in the top lane, Kanavi lost in the jungle, Yagao got crushed in the mid lane, because Faker was just better. They were tilted, and you could tell it. They really went into this game, I think, knowing they were going to lose. And from that point, if you're playing T1 and you're not confident, you're going to get absolutely smashed. You have to go into these games with the utmost confidence that you can beat them and you can demolish them. JDG just didn't seem to have it in this one. They kind of got ran over, and it was sad to see, but it's a tough end to JDG's season. This is the LPL champions for a reason, the final LPL team at Worlds. They definitely have something to hang their hat on. This was a really good year for them. This is the farthest that this organization has been in Worlds history, in their existence history. They're really not a huge organization. I mean, I'm not, in China, and I'm not, on Weibo or anything like that and get to see, like, the Chinese fandom, but from what I know, JDG isn't one of the major teams in the LPL in terms of fandom. So to see them really build up a roster of great talent, to be able to get this quote-unquote like island of misfit toys, as I think the broadcast likes to call them, 369, a reject of top esports, Yagao and Kanavi kind of overlooked after a bad last year, Hope, an EDG Prodigies like player forever, missing somebody who got cast out from Team WE. Like, this is kind of a great story for them to be the champions of the LPL and for them to really be able to show that they are one of the top 4 teams at Worlds. You can say what you want about this series, but you have to remember, when their head was in the game, they were right there with T1, and I think you could say that they were clearly one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the world, depending on your view of T1, and it's sad that their story ends here and in such kind of a dour way, but for JDG, you gotta consider this year a major success. Hopefully you can build on it. I don't know where you go with this roster, but it'll be interesting to see what they do in the offseason. For T1, you're moving on to Grand Finals. This is it. It's an all-LCK Finals guaranteed because we've got Gen.G and DRX coming in on the other side. They're going to be facing somebody else. It might be an LCK Finals rematch, or it might be Faker taking on Deft in the Last Dance. Whatever it is, it's going to be a fantastic storyline that I cannot wait. Faker versus Ruler in a 2017 rematch, or Faker versus Deft in Deft's maybe last series ever. Whatever it is, we're going to be winners, and if T1's playing like this, it's going to be very, very difficult for me or for anybody else to bet against them super confidently. All right, well, that is going to do it for my JD Gaming versus T1 semifinals overview and analysis of all 4 games. T1's going to be moving on to Grand Finals, but tomorrow, or I guess today, as you guys are watching this, we're going to be seeing who is going to be facing them. Gen.G versus DRX. It's going to be a banger of a series. Of course, be sure to let me know down in the comment section below who you guys have winning that series, and also, of course, how you felt about JDG and T1, and how you think T1's going to do against either Gen.G or DRX in the finals. You know I love to hear you guys' opinions down below. Of course, hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. If you made it all the way to 40 minutes here, you probably enjoyed the content I'm talking about. Go ahead and hit that like button. It really does help out the channel a ton. And of course, if you are new, hit that subscribe button. We're going to be putting out videos, of course, not only on the other semifinals and then the finals, but off-season's coming right up. So if you're interested in, all the rumors and all that kind of stuff, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We're going to be doing a ton of content on that throughout the rest of the year. So with all that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day. And I will see you all later.